Hey friends, welcome to AI with Supreet. And in today's video, we will see how to use native functions along with semantic functions in semantic kernel. So, to give you a brief, what native functions are, well, understand it like this. Um, so far, we have seen how to create prompts based functions, and we call them semantic functions. What semantic functions are? These are the functions wherein you basically need the help from a large language model or an AI model to do certain tasks, right? For example, write a summary, or to, for example, write a short poem, or to, for example, write an email, whatever, anything that is related to something that the AI text based AI model can do. We have been using AI models for that, and specifically we do that with the help of writing specific prompts for the AI model, and we have seen how to use these AI prompt models and get the AI to do the job that we wanted to do, right? So these are called semantic functions. Now, today we are going to look into something called native functions. Now, what is native functions? And In fact, learn.microsoft.com have a very good analogy of what the native functions are, and I'll come to that. So, what native functions are? Native functions are basically your functions which you write in your own code. These are some of the tasks that you AI model will not be able to do really very well. It is something that you can do better by writing a specific piece of a code. Some examples are calling an API, figuring out a data associated with the logged in user. You can do this a lot better because you know who the logged in user is. You can grab their ID. You can go to your database. You can call an API, get some results back, right? So stuff like this can be done rather better with the help of native functions or your own code. So in today's example, what we are going to do is we are going to write an application wherein we will see how to use the native functions and semantic functions together to create an application that does something. What does it do is basically, let's run this example here and I'll show you what it does basically very quickly. So what it does here is that it expects an input from the user, and in the input it is also looking for a city name, and if it finds a city name, it will figure out what the weather in that city is, and it will write a poem that will show you what kind of a clothes you should wear and what kind of a weather you should expect in the given city. Okay, so we are going to use a combination of semantic functions and native functions to get this job done. But before we do that, let's look into a live demo. So give it a command saying I am planning to visit Tokyo. Let's see what it does. And as you can see, what it did is basically it was able to come up with a plan wherein it figured out what the city name is in the given text. And then it called an API in service called weather service. I have this service called weather service. It has an API called get weather. And the input parameter that it requests is the city name. So it was able to figure out that, retrieve the weather report for the city. Then it also was able to use one more semantic function to get the exact name of the city from the given text, and then pass that to this weather function, and then it is writing a humorous poem, and then it's printing. So it is able to say this, in Tokyo when the clouds are broken, wear a light jacket, don't be mistaken, all of that. So it basically writes a funny poem about the weather condition and about the kind of clothes you should wear. So this is the sample that we are going to create today. Let's see how we can do that. So to get started, let's go ahead and first start a new console application. We will call this sk native functions, and I'm going to go ahead and choose .NET 8. And once the console application is ready, yeah, we'll go ahead and start installing our NuGet packages. And in today's this video, we need two packages from Semantic Kernel. One is our beloved Semantic Kernel. And I'll have to go to the browse. select the latest package available, and I have 1.1. Oh, there's a 1.3.0 available. Up until yesterday, there was 1.2.0 available. So the Semantic Kernel team is pretty fast in terms of releasing stable packages for Semantic Kernel NuGet, which is fantastic. So I'll have to go and check what is new in there. Meanwhile, we also need handlebar planners. So I'll go ahead and copy this as well. So I need Microsoft.semantickernel.planners.handlebar. Remember that this is in pre-release, so you'll have to include pre-releases, and I will install the latest pre-release of that as well. And because we are doing and dealing with some JSON, we will also need Newtonsoft.json. So we'll go ahead and install that as well. All right, once we have all our packages installed, let's go ahead and write the code. So the very first thing that we will start is with the using statements. So we need these using statements here. And just like any other video, the very first thing that we need after the using statement is that I have to delete this here, and we'll talk about this a little later. So let me just actually rename it later. So the very first thing that we need to now do is to copy our OpenAI or Azure AI, whichever model you are using. We need the credentials. So I'm going to blur my screen. All right, so I'm going to go and blur my screen and copy these credentials to my code. And once I have them in place, I'll go ahead and unblur my screen, and we will start writing the rest of the code. Okay. So here we are. So the first three steps are always going to be the same. So we'll just go ahead and copy the first three steps. We are going to create a kernel. We are going to use the kernel instance and use the create builder method to create a builder object. Give it the Azure API settings, and then create a kernel object by using builder.build method. Now the fourth step in this step is to in here is to create the plugins. Now we need four different plugins here. So what plugins we need is we need a plugin that is able to find the name of the city from the given input. Then we need a plugin that will write a short poem, and then we need two more native plugins. These are the native plugins. So these two um, are the semantic plugins. The first two are the semantic plugins, and these two are the native plugins. So we will see how to create native plugins and how to use them. And these two are the semantic plugins or semantic functions. I'm sorry, these are not native plugins, these are native functions. So semantic functions and native functions, right? So we'll just go ahead and create these. I already have them created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very quickly go to my plugins folder where I have them, and I will go ahead and create a new folder here called plugins. Plugins, and inside of that I'm going to go and add all these items which are available in here, and I'm going to go ahead and add all of them in one go. I was not able to add the folder. So, okay, let me go ahead and add the folder here and name that city detection plugin. You can name them slightly better. Then I have a function in here called find city. So we have the structure ready for that. I need one more semantic function. So I'll go ahead and create one more writer plugin, and inside of that we need another folder called write short poem or short poem. Okay, and in there we need some of the prompts and details. I'm just gonna go ahead and grab it from the folder that we already have open here, and I will give you a walkthrough. So city detection, find city, all files. I need these two, and I'll go ahead and add. Oops, I need both of them in the find city. Okay, and then inside of the writer plugin short poem, I will need to add inside writer plugin short poem. I have these two files. I'll go and add them as well. And let's talk about them. So the city plugin, what it does basically is it has a very simple prompt wherein I'm giving it an instruction saying that you have to identify and reply with the name of the city from the given user input, right? When you cannot identify, reply with unknown. But does not matter whether you are able to find the name of the city or you are replying with unknown. Always give me the output in this JSON format and restrict your answer only to this JSON format. Do not give me other commentary, reasoning, solution steps needed. The input is given as input. So that is our first semantic prompt here, semantic function here called find city. And this is the config JSON for that. In here, we describe what this method does and what are the input parameters. So if you have been following along and if you have followed one of our previous videos wherein we learned about writing these plugins and reading them from disks, we are doing exactly the same here. In the same way, what we are doing here is we have another plugin called write a short funny poem on the type of the close to where depending upon the city and the weather conditions. Both the city and the weather conditions will be given as inputs, and some other details. Do not write anything else. So I have the city name and the weather input here as input, right? Again, if you look into the config file for this, it states the same thing, that this function is used to write a short funny poem. It has a parameter called city name, which is the name of the city. It has a parameter called weather input, which is the weather input for that particular city, the weather conditions for that particular city. Now that we have our semantic functions in place, let's look into our native functions. So how do you write native functions? It's extremely easy. What you have to do is you have to create a public class. So you remember that you have to create a public class. The second thing that you need to remember is that your public class needs to be inside the plugins folder where your semantic functions are residing as well. So it needs to be under the same folder. Then in that plugin, in that class, you can write your regular JavaScript, your regular C sharp, Python, Java code, whichever language you are doing this in. I'm using C sharp. So in here, I have my regular C sharp code. In this particular case, what it is doing is it is expecting, there is a method called get city name from JSON. So what it is doing is it is expecting a JSON string, and from that JSON string, it is using this JSON convert to parse the name of the city and replying with the city name. It's a very simple C sharp function that basically is parsing a JSON to grab the city name from it. So, how do you convert this regular C sharp method to a native function for your semantic kernel? It's again very simple. All you have to do is to add this using called Microsoft Semantic Kernel and system.component model. And on top of your method, just annotate it with this kernel function. Make sure that you let the system know that this is a kernel function, and what does this kernel function do by making sure that you have an apt description mentioned against it that basically describes what this particular kernel function does. In our case, this function gets the city name from the given JSON string, right? So one single line is more than sufficient. And if you have any input parameters, in our case, we have a JSON string. So you need to also provide a description element against that, annotate each of your input parameters with the description element, saying, describing what that in parameter is used for. Now that's all you need to do to convert a normal C sharp function, a normal native function to a kernel function and give it to your semantic kernel planners. Okay. So as easy as that. I also have one more here, weather service. What it does basically is it gets weather async. There's a method called get weather async. What the method does is it gets the weather details of the given city. Of course, there's an input, it's called city, and the input is the city for which the weather report is needed. and then I'm calling an external API to get the weather report and get the weather data, and then I'm returning it, right, to the calling function. That's all. So if you see here again, what we have under plugins, we have got two semantic plugins, and this time we also have two native plugins, two native functions. What the native functions? How do you convert normal C# code into a native function? Make sure it is inside plugins folder. Make sure it is a public class inside a public class, and then you annotate your method and the in parameters with kernel function and descriptions. Once you have that, your setup is all ready. Let's go back to our program.ts file. Our plugins are now ready. So we will go ahead and load these plugins next. So step number 5, what I'm doing here is I am finding the path for my city detection plugin. I'm finding the path for my writer plugin using get current directory. Then go up inside the plugins and inside writer plugin. And then I am feeding that to my kernel object. I am feeding these plugins to my kernel object by using kernel.import plugin from prompt directory. So just give it the path of the directory. The same goes for the second semantic function. And in the third one, I am using a different method called import plugin from type, and then just give it the type. So in this case, weather service and city info. Yeah. So now we have a kernel that knows about 4 different plugins that is available to it. Okay, let's go ahead. Step number 6 is to go ahead and construct our arguments. Nothing new there. Step number 7 is important. What you're doing here is we are creating a new OpenAI prompt execution setting where we are saying that the tool call behavior is set to auto invoke kernel functions. What does that mean? Let me go ahead and write the rest of the code, and then we will talk about it in a minute. So you'll see what I'm doing here in the next step is that we are creating a planner object. So if you have gone through the planner video, you know that this is in pre-release, so you'll have to suppress the warnings. But you know what we are doing here is we are simply creating a planner, and then as the final step, I am going to go ahead and create a chat function here. So what we are doing here is we are expecting the user to provide an input, and then we are using this planner, and then we are creating a plan, and we are giving it the kernel object as first input. Now remember, the kernel object is aware of the 4 plugins that we have, out of which we have 2 semantic plugins and 2 native functions. So it is aware of all of that. And then we are also giving it this setting over here, or sorry, we are also giving it this input over here, wherein we say that, wherein we are saying that, wherein we are saying that you know what is the name of the city, and we are adding that input into the argument. So we, not the name of the city, sorry, the input that the user has written, we are passing that into the arguments, and then we are passing that to the planner, so that the planner is able to create the plan. I think I have not copied the full code here. I need to also go ahead and copy this part here, wherein after creating the original plan, after creating this original plan, we are also using this to execute it. So original plan dot invoke async, we are again giving it the kernel, and in the new kernel arguments, we are passing this setting over here, saying the tool call behavior is auto invoke kernel function. So what does that mean is that the kernel is aware of the 4 plugins that we have, and we are creating a planner out of it using that, and we are saying that the planner should be able to figure out which function to call, in which order, and then what the output of the first function call that it does needs to be supplied to a second function, and which is going to be that second function execution, in what order the execution should happen is something that the planner is able to capable of figuring out on its own, if you allow it to use this behavior called tool call behavior or to invoke kernel functions, you know. So we want that to happen, because we do not want to write a static code wherein we are saying that, hey, go ahead and first use uh, the semantic function to get the city name from the user's input, then use the native function to convert that JSON in and then from the JSON get the city name, then call the weather API. If I would have been writing a traditional C sharp code, probably I would have done it step by step. But in this case, what we are saying, we have given all the information to the planner, and we are asking planner to go ahead and figure out how to use all those semantic and native functions in conjunction with each other in whatever order it feels necessary to execute the plan that it has created. So the planner is working as an AI orchestration layer, which is able to figure out which it needs to call, what parameters is required, what it should do with the output of that first call. Should it use it in the second function, and which one is going to be the second function, and so on and so forth. So it's intelligent enough to orchestrate that information on its own, right? So I think that's all about it. That are Those are the 9 steps in which you can create your own planner that is using native functions and semantic functions, and is able to figure out which step to call, what input it needs to provide, what should it do with the output, and if it needs, it can go back and circle around and go in loops as well. How does the planner able to figure out what function it needs to call and what functions are available? Well, it's very simple. One step is that we have already fed it with all the plugins, so it knows what plugins are available. Once it knows what plugins are available, it looks into the description that is available to understand what does that method do. So, for example, if you look into the short poem config.json, the planner looks into this description to understand what this semantic function does. It also uses these variables and the descriptions over here to understand what are the in parameters that this particular semantic function requires. And similarly, in the case of native functions, this planner is able to identify what method it has available and what in parameters those methods require, what do they do, and how do they work these details out, is something it's able to figure out based on the description that you have provided. So when you are writing an automated AI orchestration app like this using semantic kernel planners and native and semantic combination of native and semantic functions, it is absolutely critical that you make sure that these descriptions are as easy for the planner to understand what they do and when to use them. As long as you make sure that that is in place, you have an application that is intelligent enough and is capable of solving different levels of problem. So in this case, what it is going to do is it is going to read the user input. I am visiting Seattle. How's the weather? There is a poem. Let's see what it does with that. Yeah, there you go. It works. So what it does basically is it created a plan. It created an original plan here using this planner dot create plan async. And remember, we gave it the kernel, which is aware of all the plugins, and we gave it the input, which is our user's input. In this case, it was I'm visiting Seattle. How's the weather? Answer as a poem. Now it says that step one, identify any key values. So it is able to identify the city as Seattle. Then step two, it is able to call the custom helper to create a new poem. It is able to then use the weather info method, pass the city name as Seattle, get the weather info, and then use the city name as well as the weather info both into city name as well as the weather info both into this method called writer poem. So to generate the poem, right? And so it is then able to generate this poem here in Seattle. When it's overcast, wear a raincoat that's built to last, and don't forget your trusty boots to keep your feet from getting soaked through. But if the sun decides to shine, you will need some shades that look just fine, and swap the coat for something light to keep you cool and feeling right. I love that poem. So yeah, that is how you use planners along with semantic function and native functions to create complex AI apps that uses both the brain, which is your semantic functions, LLMs, and the hands, the skills, which is calling APIs, your custom APIs, and all of that. So I hope you find this video helpful. Up until next video, see ya. Bye.